Let me first of all say that I'm very glad to be for the first time in my life in Armenia and have already learned a lot in the discussion until now. And I would like to present you some of my experiences during 7 years as finance minister in the biggest state of the Federal Republic of Germany in Northern Westphalia. And the first and deepest experience that I made was that after these 7 years, I have to divide politicians into two groups. So there are a few financial politicians, and there are the big majority of, let me say, normal politicians. Why I call them normal politicians? Because I think that the normal way to go into politics is that you have an objective. You want to have better education, you want to have better infrastructure, you want to have payable houses and apartments, you want to have better security in your state, and that leads you into politics. And for the financial politicians, for the finance ministers, this majority of politicians have one in common. They need money, and they would like to get it, enough of it, without causing pain to anyone in the society. And that is a little bit difficult. For a long time, therefore, there seemed to be a very ideal way, ideal solution, that were public debts. So we took the money from people who wanted to give it, but we had to pay interest rates, and it was, at the end, a very expensive thing. And as we know, today we know that in the long run, normal citizens with average income always have to pay the bill. However, normally discussions about how to provide social justice revolve around expenditures and legal regulations and not around socially just revenues. But socially just expenditures, and that's my strong belief, are not possible without socially just generated revenues. Let's take an example. When the state supplies free education for every child and every young man and woman, then in a progressive tax system, wealthier people bear a bigger part of the financial burden than they would in a fee system where the parents have to pay for their children, even if the fees would increase by increasing income. Even better and even more, also rich people without children, if paid by tax, would pay for education. And that would be just because the whole society has a benefit of a well-educated young generation. But if the wealthy people disappear through the back door, when it comes to pay the bill, then no governmental expenditure will be just. Then the bill is paid by only a part of the population, mostly those with average income and not the very rich one. Therefore, there should be a much stronger focus on that matter, a socially just generated income side of the state budget. A well-working taxation should make sure that public supply is financed by an over-proportionate share of the wealthier people in the society. In Germany, we have a name for this philosophy. We call it strong shoulders should bear a bigger share of the burden than weak ones. Otherwise, an increasing distance between rich and poor will cause problems not only for the poor. In the long run, growing social ditches also tend to become problems for the rich. We see that at the moment in France. We see it in big cities in Western Europe, where a ditch between the poor and the rich in the long run also causes problems for the wealthier ones, because the security, they are scared about security and all those things. So we must have an interest to keep the society together. The effect of a well-balanced participation of the wealthiest on stability of the society should not be underestimated. And Germany has been living very well with this system for nearly 100 years. It may sound strange, but Germany developed its long-lasting and, I think, principally good taxation system as a result of the bad experiences of 2 world wars and the need of repairing the damages of war materially and immaterially. It began already shortly after the First World War in 1920. Since then, German income taxation has always been progressive. And nota bene, it wasn't a socialist who invented progressive income taxation. It was Matthias Erzberger, member of the Catholic Center Party. And the former German finance minister Wolfgang Schäuble was so proud of that fact that he named the biggest conference room of his ministry after Erzberger. To be honest, from the first day on, this system was fought by the rich in Germany. Erzberger didn't survive it. He was murdered in 1921. But the taxation system did. Especially in times of chancellors like Konrad Adenauer and Ludwig Erhard from the Christian Democrat Party. The latter one, Ludwig Erhard, today counts as father of social market economy. Progression was strongly increased. And here we have, for instance, a picture that's not the time of Adenauer and Erhard, but the upper line is from 1986. That was Helmut Kohl, also Christian Democrat. That was the marginal tax rate at that time. And the second line is the system today. So the marginal tax rate increases up to a certain point and then is on a rather high level. And the level in former years was even higher. And today we are not struggling to make it lower or to make a flat tax. We are discussing how to come back a little step to the system that was the system before. But progressive income tax has always been only one pillar of taxation. Beside VAT and many excise taxes, such as taxes on tobacco, fuel, alcohol, real property, and others. Today, about a third of the revenue, the state revenue, the tax revenue of the state in Germany comes from income tax, another third from VAT, and the rest from all other kinds of taxes together. As income tax is progressive, all other kinds of taxes are more or less regressive. So overall, in the end, progression is very moderate. Let's see how that works. These are all other taxes in Germany without income tax. So you see, the left side is the lowest income, the right side is the highest income. In the middle, about 28,000 euro per year is the medium. So 50% have less and 50% have more. To the right, it increases rather quickly. And you see that all other taxes are regressive. It is a bigger share of the income of poor people than of rich people. So a progressive income tax is not the only thing. With this income tax, and that's the black area here, so you see the income, a strong progressive income tax, as we have it, repairs a little bit of the taxation in general. So anyone mentioned, I think it was the deputy finance minister who said the progressive income tax didn't work in the end. That is right. We see that is also in Germany so, that even with a progressive income tax, the lower income have a higher tax rate, overall taxes, than the middle. And then at the end, it goes up again. So we call it is a kind of tub. You have a tub with two sides up, and a low part in the middle. So what we in addition have to regard is the social security contributions. So if you take them in addition, you see, then you have, we call it a whale in the tub. You have like a fish lying in this tub. That makes the whole system a kind of progressive, but with two false mistakes, that still the lowest ones have a higher rate and the highest ones have a lower rate. So that is, and therefore the result cannot be that in the end we say we have to take away the progression of the income tax, because if you take it away, then it looks like this. This is the system with social security contributions, with all other taxes, but without income tax. So if you would have a flat tax, you lift up the system that you see here, and you have, in the end, a system that overall the poorest pay the most, the richest pay the least, and in the middle they have a very stable level of tax rate, about around 30% plus any kind of flat tax for the income. So, and that is, I said, the rich people, they always fought against a progression in income tax. And they say to politicians, mostly to the politicians who do not deal with financial politics, who are weaker to be convinced in how it goes, how it works right. So, for instance, they tell the story, think about it. In Germany, 50%, the upper 50% of the German taxpayers pay 95% of the income tax in Germany. That seems a lot. Only 5% paid by the lower 50%, 95% by the upper 50%. But what they don't talk about is that over all taxes, included VAT and others, the upper 50% pay not 95%, they pay 81%. So that is also already a difference. But what they don't talk about too is that those upper 50% earn 85% of the money and they own 95% of the property. So 81% from people who earn 85% and have 95% is not progressive. That's too low. And that shows inequality also in Germany. And that is what we have to correct, what we have to work against. And you cannot do it by taking away the progression of your income tax. To take the idea of more burden on strong shoulders serious, we regard it necessary not to weaken progression, but to strengthen it. For instance, by putting higher and progressive tax on capital income. And that will be more and more important in times of digitalization, in times of globalization, that also the capital income must be progressively taxed. In times, I said it, in terms of growing importance of digitalization, that will be very, very important. Even more than defects in the taxation system, public revenues suffer from another thing, from the much bigger opportunities of wealthy people and global players to evade taxes, legally and illegally. We see it here. I only have this slide in German language, but you see the both red lines. The upper red line is what legally should be paid from the lowest to the highest income, and the red line beneath is the line what is paid. So you see the difference is much bigger in the segment of of the high incomes, in the low incomes, they even pay more than they had to pay because some people do not know their rights and they pay something and they do not take it back from the state. So that is not just, that is to be repaired. And studies from Scandinavia show us that in average, 3% of tax duties are not paid, in average, overall. The upper 10% of the income scale evade about 10% of their legal tax duties, while the upper 1% only pay 70% of what should be paid, and they avoid 30%. So progression suffers the more of this effect, and not only by the system. If you take it back, you make a flat rate, then you have two effects. You take away the progression legally, and you will not stop minimizing the progression illegally. All experiences show that this tricky behavior, up to criminal fraud, is not a consequence of income tax progression. People who have the opportunity and the financial power will use each way to bypass their financial duty, no matter how high the tax rate is. A former Swiss finance minister once said in German TV that money is highly liquid and will always flow into every existing space. In Germany, taxes on corporate profits decreased in 2005 by nearly a half. Corporate tax is not progressive in Germany. And the same big global companies, all the same big global companies, do everything to minimize tax burden with the trickiest systems of constructing companies and by using each possible loophole. If countries will ensure their financial stability and avoid a ruinous race to the bottom, it needs international commitment, fixing minimum taxes, closer international cooperation, automatic exchange of information, a higher risk of being disclosed, and more transparency and tougher sanctions. And that is not only a thing of USA, France, Germany, or others, that also is important that throughout the world, also states like Armenia, Georgia, and others are part of a cooperation. Because otherwise, those companies always will look for the best possibility to bypass being part of the financing of what is necessary in a society. So the gain that the states have with the lowest taxes is not for a long time. So there will always be another country that says, then I do it a little bit more, and at the end you have this race on the bottom. You have zero taxation for all, and you can imagine the consequences for infrastructure, for education, for security, and other things. The consequent use of insider information. Or in Germany, I have to say, after 7 years of work in this office, in Germany something has begun to change. People are more aware of the enormous amount of damage of tax fraud by carrying money offshore, by using loopholes, by creating business models like cum-ex or VAT carousels, by money laundering and others. We estimate money laundering, the damage of money laundering, by about 100 billion of euros per year. So you see that is why also in Germany a lot has to be done to make it better, but not to go towards these people and make it cheaper for them, but to make better control and better administration. The consequent use of insider information from whistleblowers in Germany was the key to a better prosecution of tax fraud. It led to revenues of about 7.2 billion of euros from tax evaders. But this race will never end. It will not be stopped by giving presents to the wealthiest in advance. The solution is more also by using is more transparency, also by using technologies of the digitalization era, by more control, by better reporting, at better administration, and therefore we have a lot of new technologies to make that better, without thinking that only an easier system that doesn't give advantage to the rich and disadvantage to the poor could be the solution of the problem. And there is one thing that I learned after 7 years. It is not only better technologies and not a better use of digitalization, it is also more public pressure, together, for instance, with the media. We see that, for instance, in the question of plastic garbage. If there had not been such a strong media reporting about that, the people wouldn't have seen the pictures of the sea with plastic islands and all the damage caused by it. So the question is how to show what is the damage of tax fraud. And with, for instance, buying information on CDs from Switzerland and other countries, that gave pictures to the people, and they had an imagination how big the damage could be. And therefore public pressure, not only here, also in Germany and in other countries, is very, very important. Only the risk to be re-elected, not to be re-elected in case of not acting, leads politicians to act. In the financial scene, honesty doesn't come from lower tax rates. It comes from the fact that indecent behavior is riskier and more expensive than being decent. And that is what we have to work for. And that, I'm glad about it, is where the European Union, the European Commission, is working more and more for these questions, and is always the problem between the administration of the European Union, who is very strong in developing, let's say, resistance against tax fraud, but very often it is the problem that the single states are not united. If they are not united, then you always have the problem that you cannot change knowledge, how to make it that could work, into politics. And that is what we have to work in all kinds, not all parts, not only of Europe or Asia, but of the whole world. So I thank you very much. That is what I learned in 7 years, and I think maybe there could be some helpful regards also for the politics in Armenia and the neighbor states. Thank you very much.
I have a question. So we all know that Germany is a Bundesrepublic, so it means that there are some territories, and then my question is about, if you are talking about tax policy, what kind of tax policy is there? So, I mean, any local taxes, local policy, and then Bundes policy. Can you take a little bit about that? Thank you.
Well, in Germany, the tax policy is in the responsibility of the federal state government and the parliament. But tax administration is part of the Länder. So I was the boss of 27,000 employees in the financial administration in North Rhine-Westphalia. So only in North Rhine-Westphalia, but North Rhine-Westphalia is about more than 20% of the German population. But the Länder, the states, they can decide also on the federal level over the Bundesrat, the second chamber. And for instance, that was the reason at that time in 2011, the government at that time from Christian Democrats, from conservatives and liberals, they wanted to make an agreement with Switzerland an agreement that would have ensured an anonymous paying, not without control, and I was sure that all the fraud would go on with this agreement between Germany and Switzerland. But all the same, Mr. Schäuble, at that time federal finance minister, he signed this agreement. And we succeeded, starting with North Rhine-Westphalia and with the majority of the German states, to construct a resistance against this agreement. And at the end, the Bundesrat did not agree with that, and at the end, there was no agreement. So you see, the German states, they also have power in fixing legislation on the federal level.
It is very interesting to know how the conservative government and the social governments have acted in the field of taxation. It is also interesting that during the reign of the socialist government, Social Democrats, the post-war provisions were to some extent revisited. And in this regard, I believe that it is very interesting to consider the tax administration as a whole and not to focus on specific provisions of it. So my question is as follows. The tax code and customs code of Armenia are quite complex. At the same time, in Armenia, there is the following rule in place that employees' taxes are paid by the employer. So I would like to get your insight whether on if the complexity of the tax code or tax regulation is a vulnerability in terms of paying taxes, and whether in Germany there is such a system in place when the employer is paying the taxes of the employee. Thank you.
I didn't understand the beginning, so maybe yeah, but I heard that the employer is paying the tax for the employee here in for the employee, and that's the same in Germany. So that is very interesting. We call that automatic exchange of information. So there is no employee who can commit tax fraud because the employer has to report what he pays to his employee to the financial to the tax authorities. So that is in Germany is since decades, many decades, is absolutely normal. Interesting is in France they want to introduce it, and they have a great discussion if that may be allowed to show by the employer what the employee has, what income they have. But in Germany, for us it is normal since decades, but the capital income from banks is not reported to the financial authorities. And therefore we say this automatic exchange of information is not only a thing for normal employees, but also for the people who earn their money by letting the money work for them. So and that is what not only the Social Democrats want to have. Also, I talked about Mr. Schäuble, with whom I worked together over the 7 years. He was of the same opinion. But what is important for that is that the capital income all over the world is reported to the financial authorities in the states of the people who own the capital. And that was, for a long time, there was no chance to get information about that. And that has improved very much on the level of the G20 since 2018. And therefore, we say that we now can change to an automatic exchange of information like it is between employers and employees. And therefore, it was so important not to have this agreement between Germany and Switzerland, because with this agreement, we wouldn't have had this information, for instance, between Switzerland and Germany.
You two questions, actually, relating to the examples you brought during your presentation. The first example was France. So my question is following. Is the taxing system in France progressive, if you're aware of no? And if yes, then how do you explain the complaints about the social injustice that is that's happening right now in France? And the second example you brought was about rich people paying more, for example, for the schools, because everyone benefits from the good level of education, and especially rich people without kids paying more, and it is just. So my question is following. Isn't that statement still correct during the flat rate taxing? Thank you.
Doing what taxes? So the first thing is, yes, France also has, as I think, a stronger progression than in Germany. What they complain is not the progression, but the flow of information between employers and financial authorities. So they say that is a secret of the employee, and he has to report it, and not the company. That is what in Germany the people from the banks say, but not the people from the companies. That is the difference. The second thing is, yes, you are right. Also, with a flat tax, the rich people pay more taxes than the poor people because they have a higher income. But let's say the redistribution between poor and rich is much bigger. And as I told you, the problem is that it not only depends on income tax. What I tried to show was that without an income tax that is progressive, you have a regressive tax system. Then the rich people pay less. And you also can say then that if they have 100,000 euro per year, that they pay more to the state than the poor people. But in Germany, maybe that wasn't shown good enough. The lower percentage of under what we have as existence minimum, they pay zero tax. So we have not. If you have a flat tax, everyone is paying tax by 23%, and that is in Germany for up to 20,000, nearly 20,000 euros for married people, and 9,000 for singles. It is zero, and then it goes up. So it is a question of how strong the distribution between rich and poor should be. And the second thing is that regarded altogether taxes, with a flat tax, you at the end will have a higher taxation in percentage, a higher taxation on the poorer people. Because the most regressive thing is VAT, because if you have a percentage, in Germany it's 19%, poor people tend to spend all the money they have, because they have no room, no place for savings. And therefore they have to pay on their whole income the VAT. Rich people who only spend a part of their money, they pay only a part of their money VAT, and therefore the percentage measured in total income is much lower for higher income than for lower income. So that is the reason, and it's the same with tobacco, with cars and others. Even real estate taxes at the end are part of the price of your apartment, if you rent your apartment, and it also is a higher share on the lower income. So therefore, I think that without a progressive income tax, then a tax system is not socially just.
I believe that this point is very important for Armenia, for the discourse in Armenia. The fact that if we are taking away the income tax, the other German taxes, it becomes a regressive system, meaning that lower income earners take a higher burden. In the new government program, there is a conceptual provision that indirect taxes should be increased and direct taxes should be decreased. This provision should be kept in our focus in the context of the experience shared and the figures shared.
Well, let me say, I'm not here to tell you that you are going to make mistakes, and we didn't. We made mistakes, and the other speakers today, they told about their countries that they also did it. So the mistake in Germany was that in 2005, we decreased the highest rate of income tax, as I showed you, from 56% to 42%. And the result was that the state debt increased by more than 300 billion of euros. So, and then the government knew we have to react, we have to do something, because that is too much public debt. And what did they do? They increased VAT by 3%. And that made the German system like it is today, with this top. And that is a reason why, and we, I also have to say, we Social Democrats were part of this mistake in 2005, because we were the ones who listened to those people who have strong lobbies and who told us that is good for economy, that is good for the poorer people at the end because it's better employment and so on. And it was at a time when in Germany the growth was not the best, so that a step had to be done. That was no question. But the decrease from 56 to 42 and the increase by VAT from 16 to 19%, that was the wrong direction. And that is the reason why we today say the starting point may have been okay, but the dose was too high, and it was at the end not the effect that we thought, because there are so many other criteria important for which companies come to the country, what are the other criteria to make a decision. I come to Armenia, or I come to Georgia, or I come to Germany. That at the end, I think that it is overestimated to think that only the price is the only criteria for economic success, and it is not long-lasting, because you will be part of a ruinous competition that will go on, and that will be not good for all countries.
During your office as a Minister of Finance, did you have any statistics where the tax evasion was more among the wealthier or among the poorer? This is the first question. And second, are you for progressive tax, or are you for flat tax?
Clear that I am for a progressive income tax, but because this is the only corrective tax in a regressive tax system. So if you want to have a slight progression, then you have to have a strongly progressive income tax. Is one thing. The other thing is, sure, the wealthier people have absolutely more opportunities to evade taxes from different reasons. The first thing is that, for instance, mostly of the, let's say, average earning people in Germany have their job in a company, and the company has to report to the tax authorities. So even if they would like to, they had very little chance to evade taxes. Therefore, mostly tax evasion takes place there where you have not this automatic reporting. That's one thing. And the second thing is, on the CDs that we bought from whistleblowers, we not only found names, amounts of money, and so. What we also found was material from the banks that made a proof that they had business models to support people to evade taxes. So that, and they don't do that for poor people. So if you have not at least €1 million to put it into this business, then they say, go home. And that is the reason why the prosecution of this kind, not only of the tax fraud, but also of the supporting the tax fraud from big banks, was a very important thing to make the people, the tax evaders or the tax frauders insecure. And that is what let them go to their lawyer and say, okay, we want to make a clean table and we pay our tax. And that was the reason why we got 7.2 billion of euros back from those people.
I will formulate my question in English. So this last example is also an example, again, involving individuals or individual taxes, like, you know, big business or wealthy people's income tax related to fraud. What I want to ask is, what is the political discourse in Germany to compare business tax and individual income or labor tax in terms of injustice? For example, in Armenia, when we say profit tax, it's, for example, profit tax is much lower than income tax at the moment, and that's an injustice as it is. But there are numerous models, and that also is because of the legislation that allows that, of how big companies, and this is especially about big companies and more globalized or transnational companies that have opportunities of tax evasion or at least lowering their tax base. Just one small example. Transnational corporations have an opportunity of taking credits from their mother companies, and that is already an expenditure for them, and that's deductible from their income base, income base, and that also is deductible from their profit tax, and that's huge amounts of money. That's not comparable to the fraud that could involve the gray economy with the labor force. It's just, I don't know, I don't have economic figures, and that's the problem, that the government and policymakers don't even try to make these economic figures to compare this. So my question is, what is the political discourse in Germany to compare the corporate tax kind of opportunities for tax evasion and labor tax opportunities for tax evasion?
Well, as I told before, the decrease of corporate tax in Germany in 2005 by nearly a half didn't change anything in tax evasion. So these companies will evade taxes with 10%, with 5%, with 2%. So they evade as good as they can. That's the first thing. The second thing is, during the last years, a lot of, I think, important steps have been taken by the OECD, called BEPS, B-E-P-S, that means base erosion and profit shifting. So that is what you are talking about. And they had defined a lot of measures what should be changed during the next years. And in the G20 already a lot of these steps had been taken. So this automatic exchange is one of the things. Then we have, for instance, in Germany, an interest rate barrier and a license barrier since last year, a license barrier. That means, imagine that, for instance, a company like Nike with sport dresses and shoes, they want to make their business in Germany because the people have money to buy those shoes and sport dresses and so on, but they don't want to pay the tax in Germany. What do? They found a small firm that is placed in the Netherlands, and this firm administrates the brand name of Nike. So in Germany, the Nike company only may sell their sport articles if they put their profits to the firm in the Netherlands. So in Germany, 0 profit, no taxation, and in the Netherlands, instead of 30%, in Germany 5%. Because the Netherlands have a special rabat, a special level for taxes discount, if they are on very innovative things. And as we know, a brand name is very innovative, and therefore they pay 5% of taxes. Or you can take Starbucks. Starbucks has the receipt to make the coffee in a small firm in the Netherlands. They want to sell their coffee in Germany. So what do? In Germany, they have to pay the profit as a license fee for using the receipt of making the coffee. And not only American companies do that, also German companies. For instance, with fine dresses, so that you have the plan how to cut it, lying in an offshore in an offshore place, and then you have to put the profit there. All what you told was you give the money, and then you take it, and you have to pay interest rates to your own company. And these things, the OECD is fighting very strongly against. I think with much more success during the last years, but always with countries who do not want to participate and therefore make loopholes, and that is what is not very makes us not amused.
Mr. Borosyan wanted to comment. Thank you. If you may allow, I have some comments. First of all, I would like to share this message that we want to create an impression that the government, understanding that this will lead to loss of tax revenues, is taking the steps. The countries which were presented by our panelists, by the way, thank you for these very interesting presentations and for answering to the questions. They should be assessed in terms of comparability. The countries of the European Union, where there is no more room to increase indirect taxes. Also, the VAT, average VAT, is 22 point something. With the exception of Denmark, how the other countries have solved the VAT, high VAT. They have reduced rates for the goods which are of highest relevance. Or in the European directives with regard to excise tax, the provision is that it should be around up to 70 euros. In our country, it's only 15. Here we say that we have a potential, unlocked potential for indirect taxes. And We speak about excise tax, not VAT. Excise tax means this luxury in brackets and also unhealthy lifestyle. So now we are suggesting to reduce the income tax to improve the competitiveness of the country. So the existing system doesn't address the issue of redistribution of income either or the issue of raising the competitiveness. So now we propose to put aside the redistribution issue for a while, and then we come back to this issue later when we solve the problem of competitiveness. We don't decrease the importance of redistribution. As a social country, we expect that after a while we are going to use it intensively. But today, the existing system is hindering us to achieve two objectives. Let's also take into consideration the German experience, also the experience of the Russian Federation. The impression is that we are leading the discussion to present only those countries which have failed in applying the flat tax. Our highly esteemed colleague shared with us the experience of Macedonia, and we found out during the flat taxation, neither the shadow economy was reduced nor any improvements were taken. So was on this flat taxation the determinant factor? Shadow is not only the salaries. Shadow economy is something deeper and beyond it. But now we are speaking only about the perspective of full reporting of salaries only. I have a good news for you, by the way. The Ministry of Finance is now equipped GIM, General Balancing Model, which is applied in well-advanced countries of the world. And we have used this model to predict the impact of our reforms. The tendency is quite good. The economy will improve by 0.8%, and there are some improvements. Of course, maybe not the rate will not be too high, but still it's there. So we are inviting the civil society members and the public in general. You can make up a group, a team of 10 people, and we can present it to you. You're also invited to participate. So maybe we are mistaken. Maybe there are better instruments available worldwide. But you can of course teach us and persuade us. We are not actually freaky in trying to do things. If you persuade us, we will take the path you suggest. Thank you.
Thank you for your reaction. I would like to respond also briefly, if I can. Together with the foreign guests, we had a number of meetings yesterday, including in the Ministry of Finance. And also we met with the Deputy Prime Minister. And everyone agreed that the current progressive system is the progression of wages or salaries and doesn't serve its purpose. But why we should move towards a flat tax rate, the explanation was not clear, and during the discussion we talked about the idea that everyone seemed to agree on, that saying that if a toolkit is established through tax administration and other tools that will make it possible to declare all of the income, which also needs trust between taxpayers and the state, rather than the government assuming that taxpayers are always trying to cheat and find different incentives and other mechanisms and tools to make people motivated more and use progression of income rather than progression of salaries. If any income would be declared, then we would have a minimum non-taxable threshold that would make the progressive system more effective. I think the consensus is there as well, and for me it is still not understandable why not go that way and not get a comprehensive solution rather than take an idea of a specific tax and move on with it. In what Mr. Walter-Borjans said, it's not clear to me why certain arguments he thought were not persuasive, because the arguments that we heard are from countries that are similar in size, are comparable, and we are now facing serious challenges with the foreign debt, or with public debt rather, and Macedonia is experiencing the same issues. So I'm very happy that you said that we can get more detailed information, and so I would like also our officials to respond more to constructive criticism and
First
facts.
of all, I thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss so openly. I think that is the very most important thing, that we exchange arguments, that we exchange experiences, and respect each other if someone tries to make a different way. But in taxation, one thing is very important. It is normal, also in Germany, in a land with a very high social level, that people look at, for instance, Sweden and say it is better there, and then they look to the USA and say it is cheaper there. So we want to have the better one from Sweden and the cheaper one from the USA, where healthcare is a catastrophe and other things. So it is rather difficult to tell the people that a state with a high social security, with good infrastructure, with good education is not for zero to get. And what makes me a little bit nervous is not that there are lobbies of multimillionaires. I think that multimillionaires have the same right to stand for their interests like poor people and others. What makes me angry is that in Germany we have lobbies of multimillionaires pretending they are fighting for the interests of the smaller income. And people believe them because they have so nice figures like 95% paid by 50%, as I said, and a lot more. I could talk about a lot of stories they tell. And the problem for me is that let's say in young democracies, they try to make the biggest pressure and the biggest influence to make at the end all weaker to take their solutions. And therefore, I think we should stand together in at least some, let's say, fundamental values in taxation. And therefore, that is the approach why I say let us fight for a progressive taxation. And I do not understand when you say progression didn't work in former times, why the result should be to get fully off this progression, because I think that the problems with reporting income to the financial authorities will also arise in reporting information about property, if you have a property tax. So those people always will look for their opportunities not to give the information about their property, about their money, about their income. And therefore, I think the approach should be different, but that's my opinion, and I'm thankful that I could tell you this opinion here in Yerevan. Thank you very much.
Շնորհակալություն պարոն Բորյանց, շատ հետաքրքիր ելույթի համար, եւ մենք կհանդիպենք ժամը 3-ին այստեղ։